Good evening and welcome to the Region 15 Board of Education meeting for Monday, August 10th, 2020. I'll call this meeting to order by starting with the Pledge of Allegiance. May we all please stand for that. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag.
So are you still looking at the menu?
For which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The mission of Region 15, a collaborative community committed to excellence, is to educate every student to be productive, ethical, and engaged in a global society through proven and innovative learning experiences, supported by its strong community whose decision-making is based on the best interest of all students. To start us off with the night is the big presentation by Mr. Smith on our update on school reopening.
Madam Chair, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, that's yesterday's data. So tonight I'm going to do a couple of things. We're going to revisit the possible phases available to us for reopening. Speak specifically to what our plans are as of today, and explain a little of what it's going to look like. In the past, I've kind of shared all of our thinking and then kind of told you what our plans were. We're going to reverse that tonight. So if you only want to watch the first 15 minutes, I'll try to explain to you what's going to happen, and then I'll go into more detail for those that want to stay. So again, the options available to us are the in-person model. It may be used for individual schools or all schools. This model was originally built on the community spread rate. And I'll share the chart later this evening. With community spread lower than a rate of 10 per 100,000, we would open in full. Based on the current community spread rate, we would open in full starting September 1 as half days for all students. This is driven by community infection rates. I put a link here to where some of those infection rates are available. I have screenshots later in the slide show where we'll go through that. In that reopening plan, all students K-12 are required to wear masks while on the bus and throughout the school day. I'll say this multiple times tonight, that mask wearing is the primary mitigation strategy that prevents the spread of this virus. We know that if you wear masks, you prevent other people from getting infected. And we also know that that is true now that we have asymptomatic infection rates in the community. Mask breaks will be factored in throughout the day. If you choose not to wear a mask, or you decide that you don't want to wear a mask, there is a distance learning option available to you. We will social distance in our schools to the extent possible. That is the model that we plan on opening with as of September 1 for students. Last time we presented, we talked about a hybrid model based on community spread. That's still in existence. However, between in this one, there's been an increased conversation around social distancing and population density. So high schools in our area, including us, have started a conversation around the possibility of creating a hybrid model specifically to high schools, where the population density is far greater than it is in our other schools. I think the challenge with the social distancing as a metric to stuff in a hybrid is that that's never going to change. So while the community spread rate that drove the first version of the hybrid modeling that we built could move up and down, the social distancing, our hallways at the high school, for example, are never going to get bigger. So if we start with a community spread rate right now, I believe at 0.7, certainly below 2, that could move up or down, and we could move to a hybrid model. If we start the high school specifically with an in-person model that's hybrid, with a community spread rate as low as it is right now, the only way for us to mitigate anything would be to move to a more restrictive hybrid or full remote. So while that's not part of the state plan that we submitted, that is a conversation that we're having now. The community spread hybrid is the part of our plan. That is not how we're planning to open right now, mostly or 100%, because that is driven by the community spread rate. That's unchanged. And then the full rate or the full student remote rate is based on a community spread of 25 per 100,000. At this time, we're far from that. And that would be a full remote line. That would be a blend of synchronous and asynchronous. I'm not going to go into detail on that tonight because we've kind of gone through that several times already. And again, right now, that's not the model that we're going to. Part of the state plan, there is a voluntary remote learning choice. This is an option for any student in our district when we are operating in a hybrid plan or an in-person learning plan. In the voluntary remote choice, students will learn from home. They would log into their class on their schedule for the most part. If it's chosen, we would ask that you stay with that choice for a period of time. We feel it'll be very disruptive educationally for students to move in and out of that voluntary choice frequently. So if you're going to make the choice to not participate, for example, in the school learning, we would ask that as a family, you make that for a significant period of time, preferably whether that be the first trimester for elementary or quarter for secondary school. And that is a choice piece. That's not based on a quarantine or an illness base. The students would follow the school schedule, and again, some may not. So, for example, physical education may not be available for you to remote into. There would be an asynchronous version of that for students. So now I'm going to go through the three different models. All students, if for the in-person, if you choose to participate in the school district in the in-person, we're open for students. Students must wear a mask during the school day and while on the bus. There will not be medical exemptions for mask wearing. If your child has trouble wearing a mask, we'll work with families to develop plans to help address challenges. Again, I said mask breaks. We will have lunch service. Social distancing measures will be put in place in large spaces where students can eat without a mask. Similar to how we're holding the meeting here tonight, each of the members that are here in person are distant and sitting at tables by themselves. I'll show some pictures later of what our cafeterias will look like. When feasible, some of our classes will be held outside, specifically classes like chorus that we know cannot be held inside. They will either be held outside or be modified. We will cohort students to the extent possible. It looks very different in elementary school than it does in the middle or high school. And we will be sending out a daily check-in for all parents to fill out for each child attending school. That will be a health screening each morning. If you are considering the voluntary remote learning choice, the language on here, most of it comes from the state reopening guidelines. Students will be able to engage learning, online learning from home. The state plan requires that we offer this to you. However, the state could take away this option if they feel that the infection rate in the community or the state or in the kind of tri-state area is at such a rate that this is no longer warranted. This does not cover students that would be for homebound instruction based on an illness, hospitalization. It will not be the same as being in school. And so this is one of the choices. All of these options are compromises. None of these are school as we know it, and they all come with choices for families to make. Whether that choice is to send your child to school, there are trade-offs. If that choice is to keep your child at home and do the distance, there's a trade-off. If you choose the homeschool option that I'll talk about in a minute, there are trade-offs. All of those are individual family choices that you're going to have to come to terms with within your own family unit and decide. But if you choose the voluntary remote option, again, there are going to be things that are missed, and it's not going to be the same as being in school. If you do choose the voluntary remote option, students will remain enrolled in the school district. They will not be considered a homeschool student. We will be taking attendance every day of those students. The plan talks about future guidance. So ask me now, like, what does attendance mean? How much of the school day do you need to be in? I could tell you how we're thinking about it, but the state has not released official guidelines on attendance definitions for that. And they clearly say that this puts more pressure on the family. So as a family unit, parents are going to be expected to supervise and support their student at home, and help their student engage, to be available to support that child during the day. If you choose the homeschool option, this I would say is the most extreme choice, but it may be appropriate for some families. This would be if you feel that neither of the two choices I've just explained are appropriate for your family, then you would withdraw your student from the public schools. When you do that, you do not have to meet any of the instructional or attendance requirements of the public school, but it also means that as a family, you take over 100% of the educational responsibility for your child. That child is not counted on the rolls of our schools, but you also don't have access to our curriculum materials, district resources, or any extracurricular activities that would take place within the school. So this is kind of the slide that I think people want at the beginning of the presentation. As a family, this is what you have to choose. Right now, as of August 10th, we are planning to open school on September 1st. Do you plan to attend in person? Do you plan to use the bus? Are you looking at a remote option? And then what's your plan should we have to change to a hybrid structure or a full remote? We say we're going to survey families. These are the questions we're going to ask you, because based on how you fill out that survey for your students, we may make adjustments to how we're going to run school. If we have a higher percentage of students that plan to attend in person, then we make adjustments in one direction. And if we have fewer students planning to attend in person, we'll adjust in another direction. So if you're working on your family planning for these, I think that the in-person is going to be somewhat similar to how you've planned in the past. With the exception of the elementary, we talked about a staggered drop-off time. So students would be dropped off later in the morning for elementary school. And parent pickup may be slightly different as well as we work through the different drop-off schedules. I would think as we progress through the school year, that'll be efficient. We've secured a new application for your cell phone that will help us do pick up and drop off faster, that we'll put in place. There'll be things like mask practice that we will do with your student. If you're planning for hybrid, then I think everybody should have a plan. If we move to a hybrid because community spread moves to a higher rate, then students are going to be home 3 to 5 days a week. We recognize that that is a very complicated childcare structure for families. I can't say it enough that every family needs to have a plan in case we go to that model. That model is going to be driven by public health metrics and by safety protocols regionally. So if that happens, it's not something that you'd be able to opt in or opt out. And if we go to remote learning, then families need to have a plan on what they're going to do with their students for 5 days a week. Cohorting, this is the definition of a cohort based on the State Department of Education. Again, where feasible, as you get older, the cohorting structure changes a little bit. This is how we're going to do it in Region 15, that in the elementary schools, for the most part, classrooms will stay together throughout the day, and we'll move like your music class, your art teacher, your physical ed teacher into your classroom most of the time. In middle school, we will keep the 6th grade together, the 7th grade, and the 8th grade together as their cohort. Again, the purpose of cohorting is really about contact tracing and reduced exposure to more people. Because we're mandating masks all day, that is the primary mitigation method, then cohorting is more about contact tracing than it is about mitigation. So why would we start school in person? Connecticut currently has one of the lowest community spread rates in the nation. That's partly because of the restrictive nature in which we've operated for the past 5 months. Should the community rate increase, we would change that model. Currently, the weather that we have is the most conducive for outside instruction, for students to be outside. As we move further into the fall, that's going to become more restrictive. So the sooner we get students into school and the sooner we work through school structures and get students acclimated to the new protocols, we feel the better and more effective we're going to be in the long run. One of the challenges that we feel we face is that if we start in a hybrid model now, when community spread is at the lowest point that it's been at in a very long time, it is very unlikely that over the next 5 months, it will decrease. It may stay the same, and it will most likely increase, whether that's at a small amount or a large amount. And if we start in a hybrid, I don't know how I could come to a community and say the infection rate is higher than it is today, and yet we're going to move to an all-in structure. So our feeling is that we should start now when the risk is at its lowest. We should work to keep students in school and prepare them should we have to move to a hybrid or a full remote model. Almost all of our windows in the district, we're very fortunate in Region 15 to have some structural things that help us. So the fact that all of our classrooms have windows that allow for outside air and the ability for us to open doors and windows will increase the airflow inside of our buildings. And again, as the community spread rate adjusts, we would adjust our school. Some excerpts from our ESY program. What's interesting is that because we ran an in-person school year, summer school program, we were able to practice and work through some of the things that are going to face us in the fall. Now, we only had 100 students and 25 teachers or so in our summer school program. That's very different than the scale that we'll operate with in a month. However, some of those things aren't going to change. Relationships between students and teachers aren't going to change. How teachers interact with students when we have to wear masks and/or face shields aren't going to change. Our ability to train and help elementary school students wear masks for prolonged periods of time isn't going to change. Those things will just be at a bigger scale, but the base understanding that we gained this summer will remain. Things that will be different are the sheer number of students. So classroom transitions, lunch programs, drop off and dismissal, those will be very different. But in a classroom, many of the things we learned and saw this summer will hold as we scale our school program. So the current state metrics, these are complicated things. We want to share with you whatever thinking we have. There's no magic to this. These come from publicly available sites that you can watch and make your own decisions. This global pandemic metric right here, this is the state of Connecticut. This is where we are now versus where we were in April and May. And so this is, again, what informs our thinking about why open schools now in a full session as opposed to a hybrid. If you can see that we've flattened for the most part over the last month, and if that trend continues or decreases, we feel it's safe to bring students and staff in and to help them acclimate to school under these conditions. These are the two towns and their rates. Currently, their rates are extremely low when you look at cases per 100,000. Again, the state's going to look at this at a New Haven County metric. They're going to do it by county basis, but we're going to watch it on a town by town basis. Not so much like we've been compared to Middlebury, but it is Malta and Waterbury and Watertown and Southbury and Woodbury. These are the towns that matter when we talk about community spread. What should you expect when you enter our schools? So this is a schedule of how teachers will acclimate back on the 24th. That's the first day of teacher professional development. We'll start with social emotional training. This has been a challenging time for students and adults, and we want to make sure our staff are of an increased mindset and have some tools both to take care of themselves and be prepared to welcome students back. The convocation is going to speak not only to bringing students back, but being focused on our theory of action around welcoming and inclusive schools and making sure we, again, help teachers have tools not just to deal with pandemics, but to deal with things like systemic racism in our communities. Wednesday, and I'm under no illusion, by the way, that one day training is going to address either one of those things, but we want to help teachers provide some tools for teachers as they welcome students back. On Wednesday, we're going to focus on technology. We need to have consistency in how we run our applications, and whether that be Google Classroom or parent communication. It's very important that we're ready to move to a hybrid or remote structure should we need to. And it's important that our teachers have some of the skills needed because we'll be balancing students in a virtual environment as well as in person. The Thursday would be a teacher workday for teachers and paraprofessionals. And then we have a curriculum and instruction day, and then another teacher workday. And those teacher workdays provide teachers with a flexibility to meet their own individual needs, to be prepared to welcome students. We think those are more important this year in many ways because teachers in past years have been able to come in to their classrooms over the summer, and this year that's been a very restrictive process. So what you should expect that school is going to be different, that there's a change. This isn't how school is, and this is in no way the way that school is supposed to be. This is how school exists in order for us to move forward in a global pandemic. Parents and students are going to need to do symptom checks every morning, as well as our staff. Arrival and dismissal is going to look very different than it's been in the past. If you've been to Pompey High School, for example, when morning drop-off is, it will look very different, much more structured. Academics, we are going to lose instructional time. There's no way to bring students in and do all of the things that we need to do in the same amount of time and provide the same number of instructional minutes as we have in the past. It is going to be impacted. We are of the belief that even a math lesson that is compromised on time is still better delivered by our teachers in person to the extent possible than being in a full remote instructional setting. I'm going to show you some pictures of classrooms right now. Look different, and somebody joked it looked like a 1980s classroom instead of a 2020 classroom, but they're socially distant. We've removed a lot of extra things and bookcases and shelving. Some of their classrooms are going to have specials in them. The transition hallways, and again, if you think middle school or high school transitions, there's a lot of students in the hallways between class. Staggered movement will shorten instructional time. It will increase the transition time, which will allow for fewer students in the classroom. You'll see that some classrooms are going to be disproportionately small as the movement of students in and out of a remote setting will influence. We will try to balance to the best of our ability, but there's still going to be some permutation that will create kind of a disproportionate class size in some cases. Lunch and recess are going to look very different. Lunch has been a very social time for students. While we try to preserve some of that, the need to social distance students so that they can eat their lunch without masks kind of hinders some of that social aspect of school lunch. So here's some of our classrooms. You'll see that that cardboard square is a way for teachers to measure very easily and make sure their desks are apart. If you've been in an elementary classroom or even a middle school, from time to time the desks shift, so there may be markings on the floor to help teachers easily keep and students easily keep their desks separated. And you can see that the kind of, as we were joking before, that I don't know what school looked like when many of our parents went to school, but they weren't necessarily at tables in small groups. They were in rows set at least. That's a 3-foot square, so from child to child, you gain about 8 inches on each side. But that square is a 3x3 square that we can quickly move desks and keep them. Again, all students will be masked, so the social distancing piece is a secondary mitigation practice where the primary would be mask wearing. Here's some more classrooms. You'll see that over in, I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen. So you'll see that that's a lunchroom. And actually this is Here. That's the classroom. Oh, here's the lunchroom. Looks like there's a picture overlapped. There's a picture overlapping. So this is the lunchroom. I can break it out, and this is the classroom. So you'll see that this is not the lunchroom that is conducive to students interacting in a collaborative, social way, but it is a safe way for students to eat lunch. So I've been talking about the need to wear masks, and I know that it's a little controversial. The analogy that we've been using, it's just like shoes. Nobody can come to school without shoes on. We do have elementary school students that have trouble tying their shoes and trouble keeping them on and trouble wearing them. We help them learn to wear shoes. We have plans in place to help students that struggle with shoes. The student can walk our hall barefoot. There's no waiver. There's no medical exemption to wear shoes. They can be uncomfortable and hot. I think of my own experience and my 1-year-olds, or when they were 1 year old, and they would pull their socks off and they would pull their shoes off, and it was a constant reminder to go back and look at the stroller to find the shoe that they took off. Now my children wear shoes every day, and although we still have trouble finding socks from time to time, they've acclimated. And I think masks are the same. The mask is what keeps other people safe. And if we're going to have school, then people have to wear masks. If we're going to keep our staff in school and we're going to keep our staff safe, students have to wear masks. And now that there's potential increased evidence that there are asymptomatic, specifically teenagers, they have to wear masks. And if we can't wear a mask, then we're not going to have school. And so that is, we're pretty firm on the fact that if you have trouble wearing a mask or if you don't want to wear a mask, we'll come up with a plan to help you to build stamina, to acclimate to wearing a mask. But if you are going to choose to wear a mask, then we have a distance learning option for you. Here's the CDC's effectiveness of mask wearing. And we're going to talk a little later on about the metrics of when students have to be quarantined. And again, if the person with the mask is a carrier and there's a healthy person and they're both masked, the transmission rate is extremely low. This is true even for medical professionals on COVID wards working with infected patients. And if you have on the top, if you have proximity over a prolonged period of time with an infected person and neither of you have masks on, there's a very high rate of transmission. And if we're going to keep schools open and we're going to keep our students and our staff healthy, then we need to do everything we can to mitigate transmission. And the most effective way to do that is to make sure people are masked or to distance. And our schools are never going to be large enough to distance people all of the time. So when we can't distance, or when we're in places where that may not happen, then we need to have people with masks on. There's 2 links in this presentation. One is a CNN video that's very effective if you haven't seen it, that shows people talking with different types of masks on and the amount of moisture spread that happens. So we're going to look at the hybrid model now. Again, this isn't what we're going to open in, but you need to be aware of it. And you need to be prepared for it because it may happen. This is going to happen based on a state-created metric of 10 per 100,000. That's 10 cases per 100,000. And again, as the cases start to increase, our job is to mitigate the amount of spread, and that's where we would reduce people coming to school each day. It could happen building by building. Currently, I think that is less likely to occur. Our community is very interconnected, and I think that what happens in one building is going to very quickly happen in many of our buildings. So if we're going to a hybrid model, it's more likely than not that we would do that at a broader level than one school or one grade, although that's a possibility. And that would be that students would attend the cohort based model of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, everybody would be remote, and then Thursday, Friday. Currently, we're working with transportation. I hope that by the end of this week or certainly next week, will be able to tell you which cohort you're in so that you can plan should that model happen. This is the new one. This wasn't in our state plan, but this is a developing conversation, so I felt that I needed to put it out there tonight. This is not based on community spread, but on population density and our ability to keep specific to the high school students spread apart. Again, these are fixed variables. We're never going to have bigger classrooms at the high school, and even if we hired more staff, there's no more physical space to push them to. But if the modeling that's happening at the high school right now, and based on the survey that goes out tomorrow, we feel that the population at the high school is too large for the space. We would look at a hybrid model. It would not be the same hybrid model as community spread, because there'd be no need to have the Wednesday all remote for the deep cleaning and circulation that community spread would require. There's no way for us to open school with zero risk, and that's true of any environment. We had this conversation after Sandy Hook. We had this conversation during flu season. There are different amounts of risk. We will take every precaution that we possibly can as a school district to protect your children and our staff, and allow them to do their job. But the only way for us to truly have a risk-free environment is for any of us to not stay home. The only way to truly ensure that you're never going to be in a car accident is to never get in a car. And if we are going to move forward with that mindset, then schools remain closed. I'm not a maverick. I'm not trying to prove anything. We are at the lowest infection rate that we've had. If we can't open schools with an infection rate of 0.7 or less than 1, now, then I don't know that we're going to have a lower rate for the foreseeable future. Right now, we're saying that the best mitigation is mask wearing, and that means that it will reduce your exposure. It does not mean that infection rates go away completely. That's going to be a long tail as a nation and really globally. We know that if you're exposed to someone who's infected and both of you have a mask on, your rate of transmission is extremely low. One of the interesting conversations we had was that opening schools would change adult behavior. So as adults, we traveled less when our children were home. We went out to dinner less. We spent less time with friends. We spent less time with colleagues when schools were closed. And so the challenge to many of us adults is that as our children go back to school, how resilient are we going to be to maintain the mitigation procedures that we've had in place over time? And this is about taking care of each other. This isn't, I don't wear a mask for me, I wear a mask for you. And if we don't take care of each other and make sure that we take measures to keep each other safe, then our schools are going to close. We need to keep our children home when they're sick. We all, as parents, had that goal of how sick is my child and can they make it through the day, or child has an after-school sporting event that they want to be at and they need to be in school to do that. And where's the line as a parent? We need to be more diligent in managing that side of it, and managing the risk outside of school. We're going to put in a lot of measures to keep children safe between the hours of 7:30 and 3:30. But if they leave here and they don't follow any mitigation practices, then all of the work that we're going to do during the school day are much effective. Some of the questions that came up after the last time we presented were about how do we decide as a school district how to respond when there's a child that tests positive or is exposed to someone who tests positive. And so this is the chart that was released by the state epidemiologist and a group of public health officials to provide guidance to school districts. This came out on Friday of last week, so it's pretty new. We had a meeting this morning with a regional health director to discuss the impact of this and how some of this goes into practice. This will be a guiding document, but I do think there will be some massaging of this document over time. And so this is in there. We have a team of medical professionals that advise the school district, as well as our head nurse and our COVID liaison, who works within this document for the last couple of days, but again, will be driving a lot of the operationalization of this chart. And you'll see here that if you have symptoms and had close contact, so it's plausible that you'll be getting a communication from the school district about quarantining and isolation. So if your child comes into contact, and again, our expectation is that if everybody's masked, they will not come into prolonged contact with anybody that was unmasked and infected. And that will reduce the need for students to isolate or quarantine. If they were to come into contact, this would not be the remote learning structure that I talked about by choice. This would be a remote learning structure driven by medical necessity. And then you get into the third scenario, which would mean that they didn't have symptoms, but came in contact with someone who was diagnosed. Contact tracing is the second piece of this, that in both the hybrid instructional model and our in-person model, there's a possibility that there will be a positive case. The type of the exposure is what's going to drive the level of risk. Again, if you come in contact with someone who is infected and both of you are masked, that's a much different type of risk. The school district could close, or that school could close for a short period of time, a day, 2 days, depending on how it falls, to allow for contact tracing to happen. If we do have to do that, that is not a decision that we make on our own as a school district. That comes from consultation with medical experts and our local health directors. The contact tracing will be done primarily by the local health director with support school districts. They want to know what children were on the same bus together or the same classroom. That would be something the school district would help with. And then communication to you as parents would come from the school district and the health department together. When we talk about positive cases, they're not the same. And these are the scenarios. So if you had a high school student that had a large amount of prolonged students, other students, and nobody passed, that's a very different situation. And even if you change elementary student and high school student, it's not so much about the age, it's about exposure to different groups of students over a prolonged period of time with no mask. And even if you have prolonged exposure to someone who's tested positive or is even symptomatic, but both of you are masked, again, the likelihood of transmission is very small. And not because I'm a medical expert, it's because that is the medical evidence that we talk weekly with medical experts that are driving the decisions behind this. This is the state decision matrix. I believe this was in the last presentation. This gets into the in-person learning, and again, less than 10 cases per 100,000. We're currently at less than 1 case or 2 cases per 100,000. So regardless of how you look at it, the local metric is much less. If we were at an 8 or a 7, this might be a different conversation tonight. If 2 weeks from now, we move from a 1 to a 6, that may be a different conversation. That it's not just about the number of cases, but the rate of change. It matters. And if we go from 8 to 15 in the matter of 2 days, we're not going to go to that moderate hybrid. We're probably going to go right to remote learning. Again, that's not a decision that anybody in Region 15 is going to make in isolation. Those are conversations and decisions that will be made in a consortium with medical professionals and public health officials that will help inform us of how we make these decisions. I've had feedback from some that says we're experimenting. I would say this is not an experiment in any way, shape, or form. This is a response to a global pandemic. This is a compromised educational structure being built to teach students and maintain some type of educational structure in the face of a global emergency. There's no control to this. There's no theory that we're testing. There's no hypothesis. And this is true of a lot of things in education. We make the best decisions we can with the information available at the time. And over time, those decisions get informed. We've changed math instruction the last 10 years. That wasn't an experiment. It was research over time. Some of the phonics instruction that I had as a child is obsolete, and we've evolved our thinking. We are building a structure to educate children in the pandemic. We're doing that in the most informed way we can with whatever medical evidence is available today. And our thinking continues to evolve. This presentation is different than it was 3 weeks ago because we continue to get more information. As information becomes available, we will continue to evolve our process and our thinking to keep our students and our staff safe. As a society, we need to have contingency plans. This plan that we've worked on, we've had this conversation every day for 5 months, has evolved. Some days it evolves extremely quickly. Message came out as we entered this meeting that the CIAC, the recommendation is to move football from the fall to the spring. That happened an hour ago. I think you may see other things start to happen over the next couple of weeks as these decisions get put into place. We're going to continue to evolve our thinking, our structures to be as safe as possible. One of the things that's really hard right now is school districts are not on the same page. Connecticut's in a very, very different place than Georgia or Florida or Los Angeles. Region 15 is in a different place than other school districts in Connecticut. So there are other factors other than that chart that just had the community spread rate. Our class sizes, especially in our elementary school, are smaller than many other districts. You remember that as a board in the community, we added elementary school teachers in this current year's budget. That allows us to have class sizes of 17 and 18 in our elementary school. And it allows us to create social distancing in classrooms where some of our peers have 26 and 27 students in the elementary class, and they can't social distance and they can't move their desks apart just by the sheer number of students in their classrooms. We're fortunate for that. We're fortunate that we were able to run an in-person summer school and do a lot of the learning that some other schools who are going to open in hybrid have to learn and have to practice in September. We've gone through some of that already. As a regional district, we're financially nimble. Our board is its own fiduciary agent. We don't have to go through 2 or 3 levels of checks and balances or approvals in order to do some of the funding that we were able to shift to bring in some of the services in the PPE. Other school districts had to go through 2 or 3 levels of bureaucracy, and that took more time. So right now we have 16,000 masks for students and 17,000 masks for adults in our warehouse ready to roll out. Not every school district has built it and hasn't been able to do that. We don't have any building projects. There are school districts that are in the process of opening new schools in addition to all of this. That's not a struggle for us right now. And I think that our staff, for the most part, has been extremely collaborative in our process. The plan that we built had 50 teachers on it. And those teachers came every day during the summer, well, 3 days a week in the summer, and spent a lot of time informing this process. So their voices are part of our plan. Their fears and anxieties on reopening are part of the conversation that we have every day. And so I think that collaboratively, we're in a much better place to open than some other places in the state. Our teachers union has been extremely helpful in partnering with us and working to open our schools. That is not the case. And again, some of that's because they trust each other, and many of them live in our community. So we want to open our schools in a safe manner as possible. If our staff get sick, our schools don't stay open. So, again, there's no rush to open schools to be some type of maverick in the process. We are going to do this in a safe way. At this point, I think we can open it for questions to the board, and the numbers are up there for public comment.
Yep. All right. So we're going to have questions for the board first. And I'll probably start with people that are here in the room because I could see you and I could see if you have any questions, and I'll go to the board members who are virtual. So first, thank you very much, Mr. Smith, for that presentation. I really appreciate it and all the work that you put into it, as well as the administrators and staff. So thank you very much. Any questions by board members? Yep. Okay, Steve, go ahead.
Okay, I don't have to go. I went first last time.
All right.
I let Heather go first.
Hi, I'm just wondering, some of the metrics that you shown, they're very encouraging. I wonder if was there an address on that slide? I'm sorry, I don't remember, but is there like a dashboard that people can check in with those metrics and feel comfortable going forward?
Yes, thank you. So the metrics are all public. There's no special numbers that we're using. They come from the CDC, the Connecticut Department of Public Health. Harvard and Yale both have kind of COVID localized metrics. There were links to those.
Oh. I think I muted myself. No, I didn't. So just a couple comments. So I agree with Ms. Manzo. Thank you, Superintendent Smith, for the presentation. And thank you to, you had mentioned a slide, the staff has been very dedicated to return to in-person instruction. So I'd like to just say thank you to the 50 or so people that volunteered or were voluntold to participate in the planning. And thank you to the union for being flexible. I would add, I agree. I thought Ms. Dwyer was asking for some, like a consolidated, like a place to go find these metrics, maybe consolidated somewhere on our website. I don't know if that's what you meant, but I would support that, even if that's not what you meant, because it'd be great to just kind of, rather than have, I mean, if you have access to them, maybe just have some links to just, point out to people that are on our website. I mean, it's just a thought. I would agree also that masks are not optional. I know in other states I've read where people are saying, whether it's the governor or certain superintendents in other states, that masks are a personal choice. It is not a personal choice here. Certainly not in Region 15 and not in Connecticut. So I would agree with you on that. I'd also want to thank you for opening the schools on time. I think we're only 1 day or maybe 0 days off of the original start date. And I was reading that some of the other districts that pushed their start dates out, even whatever model they were doing, they pushed it out a couple weeks. And that has some parents frustrated that they now still have to kind of scramble for 2 weeks for childcare. And I think it just speaks to the planning that's been going on over the summer that you're able to open the district, on time. And then, so my questions are, so the high school, as of today, your plan is have you decided on the high school or not? That's one question. Let me just ask them a question about the doors too. Like, I thought in the past we were not able to open doors due to say, in the elementary schools due to safety reasons. And are you gonna be able to open them? And the daily check-in each morning, how's that gonna, is that so as a parent, I have to remember to log in and so, okay. So those are my 3 questions. Safety doors, the high school opens in what mode, and daily check-ins.
So I'm just kidding. I don't know if, Eric, can you still get to this presentation? So in order for public comment, they're going to need a webinar ID that apparently isn't on there. So I don't know if it's possible for you to go into that presentation and add it to the slide while I talk. The phone number's on there, but apparently the phone number asks for a meeting ID number, and that's not on the. So if you're trying to log in for public comment, please hold. We'll put the meeting ID number that you will be asked for when you call. That'll be on the screen on the YouTube feed momentarily. Now to your questions. So the short answer on the high school is currently we're planning on opening in full on September 1. If that changes, we hope to know that by Friday of this week, give families time to adjust. But that will be based a little bit on the survey, or I should say a lot on the survey and the modeling that's happening at the high school. So we recognize that that is a timely conversation. We recognize that parents need sooner than later. And honestly, the information that came through as this meeting started helped that conversation, because if the CIAC was going to push the fall sport to happen, we had a issue with opening schools in hybrid to keep social distancing if athletics was going to happen. Historically, we've not allowed students to participate in after-school activities if they weren't in school that day. And so if the CIAC was going to keep fall sports open and activities, and we were going to move to a hybrid, that was some of our struggle. If we're going to move athletics for social distancing, that makes more sense to us at a high school. The doors, you're absolutely correct. Again, this is a compromised model. So when we talk about trying to do things differently, they run up against things like fire codes or security protocols that we put in place, or even efficiencies. High schools, middle schools, elementary schools, they're all driven to be efficient. This is an inefficient way to put people in a building. Social distancing and efficient school models do not support each other. You know, as we spread people out, you saw the picture of the cafeteria. That is a very inefficient way for students to eat lunch. We're going to spread them out all over the schools. So when we talk about compromising other protocols, we have to change other structures as well. And so if we're going to open doors, we may have to rethink how our ASOs are structured, how we move them around, position them by door. When are doors open? When are they closed? Are there staff standing by those doors when they're open? Those are conversations happening right now. Windows are better. Exhaust fans in windows help. And in some cases, you know, we may rotate like the high school doors at each end to bring in cross ventilation, but our ASOs would be structured in a way where that's where they would be standing at the time. And your third question, I forgot. Oh, so the health check. So what we're looking at right now are a couple of different tools where you'll get a text message or an email every morning with each of your child's name and that check sheet. So I agree with you that this is a tool that as a parent you have to think about every morning. It's going to be a lot more difficult, and people are much more or less likely to seek out the behavior to participate. If it's an easy text message or email that comes in and you can very quickly check it off, and you don't have to log in, and you don't need to type your student's name, or age, or grade, or anything like that. It just says, you know, child name, and gives 3 questions that you can check off quickly. Our feeling and that of districts using tools like this. This was part of the South Korea model when they started opening schools. They thought that parent participation was much higher, and the kind of barrier to entry was low.
Thank you again for that. I do have a couple of questions, and I just want to clarify if I heard it correctly as well. So as of today, we are going back full-time in-person K through 12 after week 1, which is all half days. That was did I understand that correctly? Okay, I thought. Just wanted to make sure, and I wanted to put it back out there. So we are going back full-time K through 12 as of today, other than the first week of school, which are half days. As I know now that this went out tonight, you'll send out the survey. So that will kind of start part of the process for the cohort, or continue the process for the cohorting or class lists, individual school plans. As those class lists and cohorts go out, is it too much to ask that kind of school by school details go out as well, or maybe, you know, a little bit before school starts, so parents, especially at the elementary level, can prepare their kids? This is what it's going to look like. These are the new things that we're going to be doing.
whether it's, more hand washing and mask wearing, and this is what your teacher's going to look like or something, especially at the elementary level. For parents that might be a little bit nervous about that, or kids that might be nervous about it, kind of a calm the waters, video or list or something that they can kind of look at. That was really the only thing that I think would be really helpful down the road, if we could do something like that, more individualized by school.
So yes. All right, I have a lot of screens going on right now, so I'm going to ask Mr. Nelson, can you see my screen, or can you guys see my screen? Yeah. And you can now see the meeting ID? Okay. So I would think yes is the question, or yes is the answer to your question, that there will be continued dialogue and communications at every school level. There's planning that happens on a weekly basis as to all of the details. So tonight is kind of a broad brush. It doesn't speak to Middlebury Elementary or Bushnell or any of those schools. And so each of those principals is going to come out all of their kind of dismissal protocols, parent drop off, lunch. Each building's a little different, and so things are going to be nuanced to some extent. And so principals will be sending out more detail in the weeks to come.
And I also would anticipate that those plans can't really happen 100% until we have more of an idea of what people are choosing as well, because if a certain percentage is going to homeschool, that changes our numbers, or distance learn, for a semester, trimester.
We're going to try to build our back to school model to take into account, even if as a family you choose right now to use the voluntary remote or even the homeschool option. There's a place here for you in our schools, and we want to make sure that we don't take steps that won't allow us to welcome students back should they want to come in. The ability for parents to give us some time, if you choose the virtual distance or the voluntary distance option, then you want to transition. We saw this in European schools and in Australian schools, where parents in the beginning were apprehensive because, let's face it, the world is a place full of anxiety right now, and everybody's in a different place. And you may need some time to see schools start to open and to see what happens over the course of the fall, and then choose. And so that is what happened in a lot of the schools that we talked to that opened. Is they saw a smaller amount at the beginning, and then as people became more comfortable and as the mitigation strategies worked, then more people came back. And the other side of that is, as we watch, Connecticut has been very good, as Mr. Sirianni said earlier on. We've been very good as a state, and we've been very responsible. If that tends to change, then that could adjust the other way too.
John, did you have any questions?
I think about the only thing I really want to say overall is I don't have a lot of questions. I think, though, that my overall feeling is to support the superintendent, as I have always done. I don't have the expertise in this field, unfortunately. I mean, I know I have the expertise in the nursing field, and it's somewhat very, very difficult over there, and it's very difficult here. So whatever the decision comes down, I will fully support the decision of all the administrators, and especially Josh. That's it.
Josh, I have a quick question. If I have a child that is sick with strep throat, and I'm going to keep the child home, what happens? Does the remote learning kick in? Do I just keep the kid home? Like, what happens in that scenario when it's not COVID, but can't go to school?
So I would say the first thing is we want your child to get better. So please, if they have strep throat and they are sleeping, do not wake them up to log into their soccer class. You can take care of them. Catch them up, just like we did every year that a child's had a flu or a strep throat in the past. That being said, if maybe they stay home longer, or maybe you choose to keep them home sooner than you might have in the past. And I do think that's where, again, as I said before, when we worked with our teachers about how do we build school that encourages students to participate and not bring themselves to school when they're really sick, want to encourage that. So it's probably not a straight answer in every class and every grade. It may look different in a 3rd grade classroom. There may be a time where we say, hey, log in for this mini lesson, or why don't you just stay home and get healthy, and we'll catch you up. But if you, in versus quarantine, where you may be a child that has to quarantine for a period of time because a parent was exposed, and in that case, you may be healthy by all other means, but just quarantine. Again, we want to encourage honesty. I want to where if a parent has to travel to a quarantine space and the choice is keep my child home because that's what the executive order the governor says to do, or not tell anybody and send my child to school. If we can't trust each other and people can't be honest, this isn't going to work. And so we don't want children to feel, families to feel that they're being penalized if there's some type of contact tracing or even an infection. We don't want children or families to be shamed because they've come in contact with or come down with COVID. Because again, we want you to be safe because it keeps the rest of us safe. So this model is designed to support children wherever they are and allow them to move back and forth to the extent possible.
Thank you. All right, let's move to, I'm sure Sharon has a question, right, Sharon? Come on, there you go.
Hi, this is Sharon Attic. Thank you so much. And of course, I have questions. Good evening. Thank you to you and your entire team, administration, everyone. I know how dedicated you have been and how relentlessly you have been working. And I really do appreciate the time you have allowed us throughout this entire process. So a couple comments and then a couple questions. So to my colleagues on the board, bear with me. My first comment, I am absolutely in full support of mask wearing, but I would ask the administration to be somewhat cautious because not all masks are equal. And my comment is because, right, health workers have N95, they have different PPE. So I think we have to be very careful about how we talk about masks relative to risk of infection. Will any guidance be going out to parents or members of the community about what is acceptable types of masks, i.e. no bandanas, because we recognize more particles can pass through. Vents recently were seen to be greater for allowing certain air particles out. So is there something that will be provided to parents as far as what's an acceptable level of masks? Is my first question.
Sorry, my audio is somewhat delayed for whatever reason, so it took your question longer to reach me than some of my colleagues next to me. Yes, and we agree with you that not all masks are created equal, and that there's a difference. We had a conversation even with the masks. Mine doesn't have it, but some of them have a little filter on the side that allows air out. At the same time, some of those also have a filter on the inside that you can't see. And so there will be a guideline, a one-sheet, easy-to-read document as to these are the types of masks that we would ask students to wear or that we will provide for you. And these are the masks that are less safe. I do think, again, like this is about taking care of each other. So, and the conversations we're having with staff, to what extent do we police the mask? What happens if a child has a mask that doesn't fit? Those gator masks are the ones that the CDC says are less effective. Again, this is where, as a school district, we have a large number of masks in stock. So the short answer, we met today to talk about like who's the person in the school that has the mask that the student would see, that they have, doesn't fit. We'll have some, we delivered them to the bus company as well. So if a child to get on a bus doesn't have a mask, like we'll have them for them. But yes, there'll be guidance, I guess, is the short answer.
Okay, thank you. And I think we all know, right? CDC guidelines say the more people you interact with, the longer you interact with individuals, the higher your rate of potential infection. And recognizing, that knowledge and all the science that's being discussed, when we think about cohorts, and I recognize, and you already kind of spoke to this a little bit, that the surveys are going to drive some of the finalized plans. But is there any indication that you can give parents now, with the assumption that kids are returning, to say what would those cohort size looks like? I mean, do we have any indication? Have parents already said, I'm going to homeschool, I'm going to do volunteer? I just think volunteer remote, I think it helps people perhaps make decisions, and maybe it's a false decision. I don't know if they have an understanding. Well, right now the class of 17, we already know is likely going to be 13. Any kind of guesstimate that can be sent out now as far as what that cohort size would look like?
So, I mean, you did a nice job explaining the challenges that the parent survey will somewhat determine. And do we build, and this gets to Ms. Rogers' question too, of do we build a class list based on the survey results when we know that parents and students may change their mind just as conditions change as well. And so, when we talk about what the actual size is going to be, what we're saying right now is that the elementary school, for the most part, is going to be contained to their class. So if there's, the class and the class sizes that we publish at the budget are about the same. That most of our classrooms in the K-5 between 14 and 20. And in our classrooms, with the exception of one or two, they're easily distanced. We're moving furniture and some other things out of some of those classrooms. And we may make further shifts based on the results of the survey. Again, we want to build a structure that allows us to take the most number of students in, even if the survey tells us that some aren't coming. I don't want to I don't want to build a classroom with 17 or 16 students and then have 5 show up and all of a sudden that class is 22. And then when you get to the middle school level, we're defining it as a grade level. So the 6th grade is a cohort. Now, does that mean that all 6th graders are going to keep in contact with all other 6th graders every day? No, but they are going to be on the bus with each other. They're going to be, for the most part, on their team and in their classes. And there'll be a reduction of kind of cross teaming. At Rochambeau, there's only 1 team per grade, so that's a little different than at Memorial, where there's more than a team per grade. And so each school has a little bit of a nuanced difference. And then when you get to the high school, and this is true for every high school, cohorting is much different. So the model that we built, and I give a lot of credit to our teachers and administrators at the high school, when we started talking about bringing students back, they said, we're going to break down kind of all of the traditional structures of high school, and we're going to start with how do we build a school schedule that allows for cohorting at the high school level. And that's where you see, and some people are concerned about kind of that flipped classroom or middle class that thank you. I got a lot in my head right now, but I couldn't get blended learning out. But that blended learning, because that allowed us to keep cohorts in school and still provide lunch and reduce numbers of students at the high school. That may not be enough. And that's where we've now introduced the conversation of maybe we can't, even with that kind of restrictive type of movement, that still may not be enough. So when you say cohort, it does matter like what grade and what school you talk about. And even with busing, we're talking about now, like at a high school level or an elementary school level, even if we keep the classes together, your 1st grade classroom, you're going to be with 2nd, 3rd, and 5th graders on the school bus if you take the school bus. And so we want to do it to the extent possible. And then that's the conversation with the community is what happens when they leave us. Is your cohort your family? Is your cohort your Boy Scouts? What other activities are you in outside? And what some medical and psychology experts are saying is that as school starts to happen, people may be more willing participate in activities that they've been less willing to do over the last few months. And so that's what is important for us as a school district, to be a part of the community, as these are the things we're doing in school. But if when you leave us, and we're seeing this in the summer, if families and our students don't take mitigation, then any cohorting we do becomes less effective. But your basic construct is correct. Like, we'll be able to say, here are your classes. At the high school, the number is different than it is at the elementary school. There's no fixed number of what a cohort.
So one additional question I have then, if parents opt out to do the voluntary remote learning, given some of the feedback, and I know it's structured different from what happened in the spring, is there at all a possibility that before people can make that decision, that let's say a practice lesson could be recorded and posted so people could see what that would look like? To me, I think that could help also understand what that learning would be for their child. Is there any thought or consideration to that?
We haven't really talked about like a sample of what that would look like. Again, I think that'd probably be different for a high school physics student than an elementary school student. I don't know. I mean, I think that we've talked about what it might look like. We have teachers that are doing it. We did it for the extended school year program. I think we could probably create some samples, but it probably wouldn't be like all grades would be able to see, and all courses. When you get to the high school, there's a large number of courses. Dr. Chiappetta and I were on a webinar earlier today with the state has put together some resources that would support the distance learning choice. Yeah, I think we could probably, we wouldn't be able to have it up by tomorrow, but I do, and we're not going to ask families, we're going to send the survey out, but we're going to give families a week or so to respond. But I think some samples of what that looked like. I think the challenge that, it's a good question. The challenge that I think about is, so when I think of first grade, for example, there's going to be multiple times. And in our original plan, there was a sample schedule for elementary school. So at 9 o'clock, probably like 9:45, you might log in for a phonics lesson. You may be on for 15 or 20 minutes for that lesson. And then there may be a gap to say, 10:30 where a math lesson took place. But in other grades, like fifth grade, for example, it may be like longer mini lesson, and the students may have more independent work in between. Again, I think some of this comes down to how many students you have in front of you. So if you have a class of 17 and one student in that class has chosen the virtual remote or maybe home on quarantine, like we talked before, that may look a little different than a teacher who, like, for example, that high school hybrid that we talked, if we're forced to go to that, it's more plausible the teacher might have 50% of their class at home and 50% in front of them. And if that's the case, that lesson may look different because you may have small groups of just students in remote and just students there, or students who are remote in class in a small group together. So I think it's an interesting question. I appreciate like the intent of it. I'd want to talk a little bit to some of our teachers and see, like, I think we could provide something, but it would be more of a sample of what it would look like probably. And I don't know how, but I think that's a good question.
Think about it, because I'm listening to your reply, and one of the things that's striking me about the response, recognizing the variability across grades, is I think you hit the nail on the head in that if people, let's say there's one child that is an opt-out remote learner, the other 15 are in the classroom, that's going to look different than if there's 5 kids in the classroom and the other 12 are remote. So I do worry in some regards to the equitability of education for those people that do remote, because if that is being offered, it should be somewhat consistent, right? So as far as the type of learning that they're getting, and it sounds like it could, and I recognize there's variabilities, but I wouldn't want the one child who is the one outlier of their class to not be able to see the material or to be able to hear the material. That's what my concern is. You know, if it's happening like a live lesson, is the sound quality good? Is the visual good? Is the audio good? Recognizing there's no speakers coming down from the ceiling. If a child in the room is asking a question, unless the teacher repeats it, the student on the computer is not going to be able to hear it. To me, this just speaks to, I really want to understand the quality of that remote learning. And this not only is for the voluntary remote, it's also for the cohort, right? Which of course, that's a little bit easier to manage, but it speaks to how those children for those 2 days, when it's not the 100% of the class remote, 50% of the class would be remote, would actually be receiving that education. So to me, you know, some of the things that you responded with actually give me more pause about the quality of the remote learning. And I think I'm reflecting more on some of the feedback from the spring learning. I hope we've learned from that experience and it's much more robust. So maybe give it some thought, but it would be very interesting to me to see what that quality of education, particularly from a sound and visual perspective, would be.
And I think that, and it's on one of the slides in here, that there is a recognition that if you choose the voluntary remote learning, like there are compromises. The sound quality, the video, like we think and we believe based on how we have wired our schools and our wireless access points that, video quality should be fine. But we don't have every classroom wired for a virtual environment.
Totally agree.
Speakers mounted to the wall. So there's going to be some compromise. I do think, again, if we get critical masses, so if I use first grade at Gainfield for an example, if we have 12 first graders that all say they're going to use the voluntary remote right out of the gate, we can cluster those students, whether we split them between 2 classes or put them in one, and kind of guide our instructional model in that direction. But that's going to depend a little bit on how that works in each classroom and each grade. But there is no way for us to ever make that virtual experience the same as being in school. There's just no way,
Totally understood. Yeah.
So, and I think that is, we're going to be much different than we were in the spring. I think we're much better prepared. We're much more equipped to do kind of the synchronous learning than we were in March and April. Our schedules, like all of that stuff has evolved quite a bit. And we do recognize that there are going to be students that are home for a lot of different reasons. One of the conversation we had about even clustering the students together is that may take care of the students in the voluntary situation where they're out for the first trimester, let's say, but that doesn't help the student who's home on self-quarantine because we can't predict what classroom that's going to be in. And we don't want to move students from teachers. So like I would tell you, we've had a lot of conversation. We've had a lot of tabletop scenarios where we've said, what do we do with this kind of child? What do we do with that? But in all scenarios, like I can't tell you there's never going to be a really good way to deliver first grade instruction virtually. Like no matter how good we get to it, it's always going to be that compromise. And I think if I channel the commissioner of education a little bit, I think they recognize that being in school provides opportunity for students of all socioeconomic backgrounds that distance learning can't provide, especially for younger children. And that's where you've seen more conversation about trying to open schools and making sure they're safe for students.
So I fully appreciate and thank you for that. And I totally agree that face-to-face learning is by far the better way to educate our children. I just want a little bit more confidence that for whatever the reason, whether it's a cohort model where 50% of the students are learning remotely, if it's a voluntary remote, or if it's a child that's self-quarantined, not exhibiting symptoms, but maybe they have to be home because they were exposed, that if they're home, at least they can see the teacher, they can hear the teacher, and they can submit questions and get their questions responded to. Because without those basic infrastructural things, it's totally flawed. So it's that level that I'm really looking for, recognizing that the other pieces are not available, and or they're variable. And that for me is, it's just important. And I think it would be important to a lot of parents when they start thinking about, potentially choosing to keep their child remotely, or if their child is quarantined or in the cohort model.
So that I can speak to. So, the webcam built into laptops doesn't provide good microphone sound. So we're in the process of purchasing external microphones and cameras for every teacher in every classroom. Again, we've drawn the line a little bit where we're not going to project the whole classroom to the child at home. I think that opened up the door for other things happening. And when, again, our teachers were at the table and we were talking about how do we provide at-home instruction in a way that's feasible and manageable for our teachers without creating additional anxiety and stress about classroom management in different places, that the camera on the teacher, on the lesson, on the smartboard, the field of view, so to speak, was somewhat controlled. That's where our teacher said that they could support, and that's something that they would work with us on. They were more uncomfortable about what happens when the whole class and a child who does or says something, that are they responsible for it? Is there some kind of violation of privacy rights? So the field of view is somewhat limited, but our ability to say, here's your schedule, here are your classes, and you're going to log in at that time to your Google Classroom, and we're going to stream that lesson. Like, that is what we're building.
Okay.
So that synchronous piece is there. Now, where in the presentation, like PE may not work that way. Although we have PE teachers looking for tripods and phone mounts so that they can record and include students that way. But I think that's probably a little more, there's more of a spectrum of conversation on, like, what does tech ed look like in this environment? When we talk about math or classroom-based instruction, that's a little easier to kind of wrap our heads around. We have some very innovative teachers and some very creative. When I think of, like, our ceramics teachers, our pottery, our theater, our tech ed, those are probably a little more nuanced than, the math lesson.
Thank you.
I see Heather Rogers has another question, but before I get to her, I just wanted to ask Richard or Peter, did you guys have any questions? Yeah, I see that they're both muted, and I just wanted to give them a shot before I circled.
Hi, Marion. It's Peter.
Okay, Peter, go ahead.
I can see from the efforts that have been put in that there's a lot of thought and a lot of work that's happened here. Though I don't agree with all of it, I think it's a sincere effort to make this the best possible situation in a bad situation. So I will give you full support on my end. And if there's any way that I could help with that, I'd be more than willing to. Aside from that, there are still issues that I have that are unresolved. And at some point, after we get this things to the point where the kids are at least started in school, maybe we could have that conversation. That's it.
Thank you, Peter.
Yep.
Richard, did you have a question?
No, Marion.
Thank you. All right, I'll circle back to Heather Rogers. Able to speak to or speak a little bit about, like, specifically kindergarten assessments, class, how you're going to do that, because I know that's kind of a little, I know you haven't been able to do the assessments yet. Normally we have the kids in and they sit down with each child, and that's how they form their classrooms, to kind of spread everybody out a little bit. How does that work with kind of keeping them in cohorts if we're bringing them in and we're going to spend that time assessing them
and then we're going to change what might be their first initial group or cohort. How is that going to work?
Smile a little because we have a lot of conversation about kindergarten specifically, and I think it's a struggle when you talk about students who've never been to school before, and how do we bring them in? On the one hand, they don't necessarily know what to expect, so it's not different to them. And on the other hand, everything that we've done in the past is different, and so that's where we started last time. We're going to bring in kindergarten a day later, so that the first day here isn't the same as everybody else, so that we can put more staff to acclimate them. And I'll look to Dr. Chiappetta to just, visual cues to see if I leave anything out. We've had lots of conversation with elementary school principals and kindergarten teachers about what it looks like, all of those assessments, and really what we've talked about are the first 3 days of that week to be really exploratory time, where at the end of that week, the students would actually get their teacher in their class. But all of those assessments, that the first 3 days of kindergarten would be much more exploratory, with students and teachers would get to know each other. All of the things that we would normally do would happen over those first 3 days. We had some conversation, and if there's kindergarten parents listening now, that maybe the first day of school, that Wednesday, we would ask parents to bring their kindergartner in, so that the first time they ride the bus could be with us, with the teacher, so that they didn't have to be at a bus stop and get on with other students. All those things that we used to do in kindergarten that we can't do right now. And so I think those are the kinds of things that I think will come out from our buildings specific to kindergarten, our parents who may not be part of the school district yet. So they're learning too, but we're rethinking every kind of point of entry that a kindergarten and a kindergarten family would have had in any other year.
I understand that part. I think a little bit of the concern would be, so all of, well, not the high school, probably not the middle school, but the elementary level, most of the classes will have been set already. So they're going in pretty much in a cohort. That would be the only thing that's still kind of in flux that may change, well, that will change. But I'm still assuming that even with that change, kindergarten isn't a huge group of kids through every single building. So they're still kind of sort of their own little cohort. They're going to be masked. They're going to be learning all of these things. So hopefully that's enough of a mitigation. Like, I think that's my worry, that it's a group that's going to then be divided, so the cohorts will change. I think that's maybe a little bit of a concern.
Well, to some extent, I think students are going to probably, they'll be kept in smaller groups.
Yeah, and there'll be minimal changes, after, and they have and then there's that long weekend too. So they'll know by Friday, the end of the day Friday, that the principals will send home an email with your child's teacher, and then that following Tuesday, they'll come into their classroom, but there'll be small changes, minimal changes.
Want to make sure we call.
Yep. Any other questions, comments? Yep.
There's people on the Zoom chat that have asked questions, Madam Chair, and I don't know if you want to, they're not really comments, they're questions, and I don't know if it'd be appropriate maybe to put them in the Q&A or redirect them to ask. I think there's going to be a Q&A session on Wednesday or something, but they're in the webinar chat. I do recognize the names, so they are Region 15. I can.
Yeah. So did you want to take questions during your presentation, or is that more appropriate for the webinar and these people can make public comment? Yeah.
I think the challenge, I don't mind taking questions. I think the challenge becomes that's not necessarily a comment.
Right.
So
yeah.
I do have it 2 o'clock on Wednesday. Let me just double check. A a community forum set up that we can do. We're discussing right now in a webinar format or the YouTube. So the webinar format like this, there's a limit to the number of people that can participate. Or if we do the YouTube with the chat, it can be unlimited. I don't want anybody to not be able to ask questions. So we can take some of the questions that are in there, we can add them to our Q&A. The Q&A is online right now. I think we're up to 29 pages of questions and answers. So you can log on to our website and you can see those questions. You can certainly add any questions you have to the email, reopening email that is monitored, and we can add them to that, and we can certainly address those questions on Wednesday, and then public comment. You can certainly ask those questions, and then take them down and answer them offline.
I think that's appropriate. So the people that are waiting still have an opportunity to speak during public comment. If they have any direct questions that they want to ask you to get answered, they could definitely do the webinar that you're proposing on Wednesday.
Right.
So we will get to the people who are holding for public comment. Before we close this part of our agenda, I just wanted to say a couple comments as well. Like the other board members, I'm very appreciative of the amount of effort it has taken over the last several weeks to deal with this, with the constantly shifting landscape. Just when you think something was settled, the governor changed something right away, and it was like you're back to square one almost in some ways, which was very frustrating. It's been a very tense summer, and I see all the work that you guys are doing, and I really appreciate it. And every time I have spoken to Mr. Smith, he's already asking the questions that I had on my mind anyway, so I always felt that you were asking the right questions and trying to get to the right answers. I think I am very confident in what you have put forth tonight. I feel also heartened by Dr. Fauci coming or appearing at a press conference with the Connecticut governor and saying if there's any state that can pull this off, it's Connecticut. So I think we are well positioned to do with what you are proposing. I agree with you that there's no such thing as no risk. But I do think that you have looked at this from many different angles and that you're taking all the precautions that you can. And I trust that and I have faith in it. I think that you're acting in the best interest of students. And that to me is the most important thing that you guys are doing. So thank you for that. And, you know, for anyone who's not comfortable with the no risk, you know, option, that there, you know, there has to be some risk here. There's always the option of remote learning. So I think that that's also nice for parents that are not comfortable with this, that they can do the remote learning as well. So thank you for all of your effort. You have my full support in all of this, and thank you very much. And hopefully things will not move too much again before the start of school, but I'm not holding my breath. All right, so moving on to the approval of minutes. May I have a motion? Oh, the public comment is, yeah, yep. All right, so next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. So may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the June 22nd regular meeting of the Board of Education?
Motion to approve the minutes of the, what date was it?
June 22nd, 2020. Yeah, that's John Cookson that was making the motion. Do I have a second? Second, Heather Dwyer. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so it's all of us and aye, and I don't see. Yep, get an aye from Sharon. Okay. That passes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the July 20th special meeting of the Board of Education?
Motion to approve the minutes of the July 20th special meeting.
John Cookson has made the motion. Is there a second? Heather Rogers has done the second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
John, you and I?
Aye.
Aye. All right, it passes. Next item on the agenda are board member comments. Any comments from board members? No? Okay. Let me just make sure I've got Sharon, Peter. All right. Don't see anyone waving their hands online, so we'll move on. Next is comments from citizens. The Board of Education will recognize citizens of Middlebury and Southbury, and citizens are asked to state their name, their town of residence, and to limit their comments to 3 minutes. And generally, we do not respond to comments, but we are listening and we are very appreciative of the comments that get made. So Mr. Nelson is going to help me navigate and set up who's lined up for public comment.
Okay, phone number ending in 8454. You should be allowed to talk now. So if you unmute yourself, you could make your comment.
Jeremy, can you give that phone number one more time?
Yes, caller with the phone number 8454, the last 4 digits. You can unmute yourself and give your public comment at this time.
Oh, I think we lost that one. They could always call back, but Jeremy, can you move on to the next one?
Yep. All right, phone number 3407. You are now able to unmute yourself and talk.
All right, so that phone number, last 4 digits, 3407. You have to unmute yourself to talk. Yep.
Hi, I haven't heard you mention preschool. When will that be starting?
Yeah, go ahead. Just
September 1st, the same date as the all grades except kindergarten.
Okay.
I can say there was an email sent this evening on to the pre-K parents. So if you didn't receive it, we'll post that to the website as well.
Phone number ending in 7007. If you unmute yourself, you'd be able to make your comment at this time. We'll repeat the number, phone number ending in 7007. If you wish to make a public comment, you can unmute yourself and then you'd be able to make your comment.
all right, Jeremy, we'll move on to the next one.
Phone number ending in 2638. If you unmute yourself, you should be able to make your public comment at this time.
Hello?
Yep, you're on.
Hi, so I'm in high school and I haven't heard anything about the buses, and my bus picks me up at 6:15 in the morning.
Can you just state your name, your town of residence? Thank you.
Ethan Middlebury.
Okay, Ethan, go ahead. You got 3 minutes.
So the buses, my bus picks me up at 6:15 in the morning and I get to school at 6:45. So I usually wait for 30 minutes before I go to class. So are we waiting on the buses till 7:10 and then heading straight to our first class? Or are the buses coming later, or are we just supposed to go to our class as soon as the buses arrive?
All right, Ethan.
Put that on the
We're going to put that, this is a time for public comment. So if you have any comments, you're welcome to say them, but if it's going to be question and answer, we're going to answer them at a later time through the question and answer website that we have.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Ethan.
That's a good question.
You're dying to know too, Husky. You want to know too? Yeah. All right, Jeremy, do we have another one?
Phone number ending in 3983. If you unmute yourself, you can now speak.
Hello?
Yes,
Yep.
hi.
Hi. I have just a few, well, I have 3 questions. One, the children who are doing the virtual remote learning, will there be packets for the parents to pick up for them, or will the information be emailed for them to print, just so that way they can have the same dittos that the classroom is having?
Hi, could you state your name and your town of residence, please?
Oh, sorry. It's Michelle from Southbury.
Hi, Michelle. Okay, so this is an opportunity to do public comment for 3 minutes. And if you want to have questions, that's great. They'll get answered at a later time, though. So did you have any other questions or comments to make?
I'll wait for Wednesday then. I did try calling earlier. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Just before we get to the next caller, just to remind the public that's waiting, if you could please state your full name and your town of residence before you start speaking, so that we know who you are and have a record of your call, that would be great. So thank you. Jeremy, do we have any other callers?
Yes. Caller with the phone number 9270. You should be able to unmute yourself and talk. Phone number 9270.
They have to do *6 to unmute?
Yes.
Okay.
*6 will let you unmute if you're.
Okay, so yeah, *6 allows you to unmute. So last 4 digits, 9270, you're up. If you could state your name and your town of residence, you can give your 3 minutes of public comment. It allows you to unmute. So
am I unmuted now?
Digits, 9270, you're up. If you could state your name and your town of residence, you can give your 3 minutes of public comment.
Hi, my name is Robin Wright, Middlebury. Am I unmuted now?
9270, you're up. If you could state your name and your town of residence, your 3 minutes of public comment.
Hi, my name is Robin Wright.
Hi, Robin. I muted you. If you can turn off your YouTube feed in the background, then you'll be able to speak clearly and people will be able to hear you. So if you unmute yourself again, just make sure your computer's turned off in the background where you're watching YouTube.
Robin Wright, you're up. So if you could unmute yourself, *6.
Hi, this is Robin Wright. From Middlebury. I just wanted to for the board to consider. I noticed that they were bumping up the start time of school for the high school and for the middle school. And I just am concerned about the transitions that will be taking place for the kids that haven't been having to get up at any set time for 6 months now. And just hoping that that transition could maybe be a little bit easier. I appreciate the half days that you're doing at the beginning. And so that was just one thought I had. I also, because I'm just thinking the kids are going to be so tired and so stressed with so many things happening, that might be an added factor. And I understand all the reasons as to why you are not opting for the hybrid model currently. However, I was hoping as a parent that maybe we could do it for, say, 2 to 3 weeks, just as like indoor dining was phased in, you know, just to see how it goes for the first couple of weeks, to see if there's any uptick in cases before we proceed to full day. So thank you for all of your hard work. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Wright.
Phone number ending in 7857. You should be able to unmute and give your public comment at this time. 7857, you have to hit *6 to unmute.
All right, so phone number ending in 7857, you have to hit *6 to unmute. Please state your full name and your town of residence to have your 3 minutes of public comment.
Hello?
Yes,
My
hi.
name is Karen Hennessy. Hi, this is Karen Hennessy from Southbury. I just wanted to make a comment about the class sizes at the high school. I believe that some of the classes are 24 students, and I'm wondering if that size students are, is it possible to social distance that number of students in a classroom? I'm also concerned about the use of water bottles and bathrooms at the schools, whether students are going to be able to use water bottles and also use the bathrooms on demand, and what the process will be for that. I'd also like to agree with the last caller who was saying that the hybrid model would be a good idea to start at the beginning of school, just to get those bugs worked out. As I hear comments, I think there are quite a few bugs to be worked out. So I do agree with the last caller that that would be a good idea. And again, I thank you for the work that you're doing and support all of your efforts. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hennessy.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 6121. You should be allowed to talk now. You just have to hit *6 to unmute. Caller 6121, you have to hit *6 and you'd be able to unmute for public comment.
All right, let's go on to, is there another one, Jeremy?
Yes.
Okay.
Stephen, who's in, no phone number. Stephen, you should be able to unmute and speak at this time for your public comment. Just please state your name and town of residence. We'll move on. Tina, you should be able to unmute at this time. If you have public comment, please just state your name and town of residence, your full name and town of residence.
Do they have to dial *6 too? Mr. Nelson, or they just are automatically unmuted?
They should be able to just unmute.
Okay. Yeah, is that you, Tina?
No, she hasn't unmuted yet.
No? Okay.
All right. Well,
Oh, she's
Tina,
on right now?
I'm sorry. Tina, are you there?
Hello,
Do you
Tina,
mean
can you
Tanya?
say your full name?
Tanya.
And your Tanya, sorry.
Got it. My fault.
Tanya, can you please state your full name and your town of residence?
Sure, it's Tanya Fernandez, Southbury.
Go ahead, Tanya.
So I'm sorry, mine was mostly a question, not really a comment, but definitely thank you for all you're doing. This cannot be easy, and I do not want to be in your shoes. But definitely, I know that there was no clarification on the cohort groups about the high school. There were some rumors about the high schoolers maybe staying in the classroom and not moving, and I was just worried about, I guess, the electives. So I guess I'm sure there's going to be future things coming during email and more information. So I just wanted to comment on that if later on it could be clarified how the high school is going to work with electives and classrooms.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hernandez.
Thank you.
Mrs. Manzo, at this time, we've given everyone the opportunity to speak. We do have several callers that didn't acknowledge when we did, but everyone has gotten the opportunity at this point.
I'm gonna go back over them again. Yeah, Mr. Nelson, can you just give them one more shot?
Absolutely.
Call out their last four numbers one more time, just so they have an opportunity again.
Yep. Caller with the last four digits, 8454. If you'd like to give public comment, please press *6. And
Hello?
Yep. And can you please just...
Hello?
Yep, you're on. Can you please just...
Oh, great, okay.
Full name and your town of residence, sir.
My name is Pasquale Pisano, and I'm from Middlebury. And I was phoning because I have a couple of kids in the elementary school level, and at the last meeting I recall it being indicated that they weren't going to be spending considerable amounts of money or minimal amounts of money to purchase individualized desks and such. And the photo that you showed this evening was a nice pretty photo of a whole bunch of desks for everyone. And so I'm kind of curious as to how one gets from one place to another without actually spending finances. And I want to ensure that each of the kids from grade pre-K on up have their own individualized areas as opposed to tables, that they have desks and not making use of, say, the floor or some other thing going on where they might have like a small laptop desk or something. Because at the end of the day, the younger they are, the harder it is to kind of keep them riled in, or kind of keep them reined in, I should say, to their desk. And I think that's about it, because it's just comment, right?
Yes. Thank you very much. And I didn't get your last name, Pasquale.
Pisano.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Phone number ending in 2493. If you press *6 and please state your full name and town of residence, you'll be able to give public comment at this time.
Hi, my name is Christina Pierce from Southbury. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello, Christina.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi, thank you for everything everyone has done. I know there's a lot going into this, and this is going on for a while. This is a comment, though, not a question, that I just would like to be heard. I know we were mentioning that some protocols have to be compromised in order for all of these plans to come through. And I just want to be sure that school security is not one of them. School security cannot take a back seat to all of this. We're in a good place with school security. I think that the district has worked really hard on that. And I'm concerned with hearing about doors being opened, especially exterior doors. I know airflow is a big deal with all of this, but I just want to be sure that school security is being thought of top of mind. That's all I'd like to say. I want to make sure that that's being thought of.
Thank you very much, Ms.
Thank you. Thank you.
Phone number ending in 7209. Please state your town of residence and full name. And if you hit *6, you should be unmuted.
Yes, hi, Angelica Adams in Southbury. So I just wanted to comment that parents send their sick kids to school all the time. So a little concerning, trusting that the parents will be honest in these morning assessments. I'm also still a little unclear if a child or a teacher is sick, will the other parents be notified at all? And then I'd also like to agree that I would personally have preferred a hybrid model over full-time in the beginning, just to kind of get everyone back into the whole routine and seeing what happens with the numbers. That's all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adams.
Stephen, if you are available and you want to give public comment, you just need to unmute yourself and then give your full name and town of residence.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually had a question, but since you're not taking questions, I'll just say thank you for all your efforts. My daughter will be entering kindergarten, so this will be sort of normal for her, I guess. There's no other experience, but that's all I had to say. I'll save the questions for Wednesday. I originally called for questions, but I don't want to impede in your plans. And that's it.
Thank you, Stephen. Can you actually state your full name and town of residence for the record?
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. My name is Stephen Medina from Southbury.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Everyone has gotten the opportunity to speak now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nelson. I appreciate you helping us with that. Next, we're going to move on to new business requiring board action. May I have a motion to approve the updated Region 15 2020-2021 school calendar? Heather Rogers does the motion to approve. Is there a second? John Cookson, second. Josh, do you want to take that? Any discussions or?
So this,
this was the shift to the first 4 days of student instruction to half days. We did move the staff PD days, but again, the board hasn't voted on staff days in the past, just student days. I think we would agree with many of the parents that made public comment about the need to transition in and the need to work through some of this. We felt that the half days allowed for staff to have time in the afternoon to reflect on the morning and what worked and what needed to be altered. And so instead of moving to the hybrid model that was designed in the past, that was around community spread. And so we keep going back to using hybrid models designed for one purpose and using them for a different one. Again, we want to be transparent in our thinking, and that hybrid model kept 50% of the students home on remote learning, which would mean that some of our students would start the school year in a remote learning process before a teacher had the opportunity to meet them, before they got to sit in a class and even learn how to get into their Google Classroom. And what it probably would have meant is that some of our students would have spent the first 3 days home without access to their school at all. And so the idea of the half days to transition, I don't disagree with the comment about having students getting up earlier. I think it's always a challenge having middle and high school students myself. And this has been a longer time than normal summer. But the idea of the half days was to bring all of our students and get them started on the same kind of footing. So that those first couple days, they could meet their teacher, they could learn about Google Classroom, they could learn so that if we did have to go to a hybrid, they would have some context. Our concern was having a large number of students not in school. And so that's why the first 4 days were half days.
All right, any Steve questions?
Yes, thank you. Comment and when there are, so I had asked at the last meeting about some of the, I guess, Columbus Day and Election Day questioning why they would be days off, especially if we're sort of trying to get things in under the gun, maybe in case they get worse. And I understand that, you know, Columbus Day might be worked into the contract. Maybe there's some flexibility with Election Day. I'm not going to belabor that. I guess that's basically just one day. But what I might ask them maybe would be, you know, if we are in a model where we're doing the regular hybrid, and I understand that you maybe need the middle day for cleaning, but maybe it's something to consider if it's a 4-day week. Maybe you skip that middle day, you know, so you could, you know, rather than then instead of having Wednesday being everybody remote learning, you could do your 2 and your 2 in the 4 days that you have in that week, where you have some kids in school. And I would just ask that, and I'm sure you would anyway, but there's the balance between who has a lot of Mondays off and there's like hardly any Thursdays off. And so we don't want to, since it's already going to be, if we're in a hybrid model, it's already going to be a premium as getting kids in there. We don't want to shortchange the Monday, Tuesday kids. And then I would ask also that I don't think the 2021 22 calendar has been discussed or even started. And I would just request, I guess I'll speak to the board chair. I really would like the board to personally sort of have more control over that. I mean, I have a lot of questions about, historically we've gone to committee and sort of just been told this is what this is what everyone agrees the calendar is going to be. And, I have some thoughts about obviously what the calendar should look like. And they also need to, if we're going to act on them, they need to be negotiated potentially. And negotiations are, I think, this year, if am I wrong or right? Yeah. So in
Errors, or this not to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Errors are this year, teachers are next year.
Other next year. So in any case, they need to be, it's a long process to think through. So I would just request that we have a lot more input than we normally would, at least in the beginning. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions about the updated 2020-2021 school calendar?
Marion, this is Sharon.
Sharon, I think
Sharon, do you have a question?
I just want to build off of, I have a question based off of the last answer from Mr. Smith. So I struggle a little bit, and I know you spoke about this earlier in your presentation, that if we started with a hybrid model and the incident went up, then going face-to-face would pretty much be null in existence. And one could argue that that actually speaks to why a hybrid model should be utilized, because if you start to see increased risk of cases, then you're actually controlling having higher rate of infection relative to face-to-face. And I recognize that you talked about community spread and the rationale for having the half days up front. But I also heard in that this is the model moving forward, but over the next 3 weeks, if the community spread changes, I would imagine that the plan could change and cohorts could be in effect. And then your concern about having students start remotely for the first time would still be in play. I just want to make sure that if things change in the community, that the face-to-face model will be reevaluated based off of the community spread, and that a cohort model could still be considered relative to what happens between now and 3 weeks from now.
So yes, The reason the board has to vote on this is because we're changing from full days for students to half days, kind of irrespective of the 3 phases.
Okay.
Like I said, our biggest job as a school district is to protect children. If we don't do that, then we can't do instruction. So the first thing we need to do is keep students safe. And we take that very seriously, and we are not going to take unnecessary risk with any type of infection. Again, Connecticut and specifically Region 15, this is a very local conversation. We are not Florida, we are not Georgia, we are not Los Angeles. This would be a very different conversation if we're in those places. And I would not be recommending, if we had infection rates in the community like those towns or those cities or states have, this would be a very different conversation. We're having a conversation about our students, about your children in our schools, and about our staff in those schools. I am very conscious of the fact that our community spread rate may not get lower than we have right now. That as a state, Connecticut has been very diligent. We meet with the governor's team every week. They do a emergency management planning team. We get updates. I know how hard our state is working to keep these infection rates low, and I am not looking to take a risk with anybody's child. If over the next 3 weeks, things do not remain the same, this is a very different conversation, and we are not, like I said, I'm not taking any risk. And I respect any family that feels like even where we are right now, you don't have to necessarily agree with me or the numbers. And we have that virtual learning opportunity for you. And again, we're going to do our best to educate all of our children, whatever the circumstances. And part of the reason that we're committed to the mask wearing is because if we're going to open schools under any circumstances, that is the only way that we can assure safety for our staff and for other people's children. So I don't want you to walk away thinking for a minute that we're stuck to a certain model. I know for other families that's frustrating because now you need to have contingency plans. And I can't tell you that 3 weeks from now, what's going to happen. I can tell you that you should have plans for all 3 of those models. And we're going to do the one that is the least aggressive, if you want to look at it that way, that we're going to do a conservative job of opening schools and change as the need changes.
Thank you.
Marion?
Yes, Richard.
Okay. I can't come on video because the host is not allowing me to. But anyway, I wanted to say something to Josh about the safety and the little bit of risk we have to give to our students. You are going to allow elections in the buildings when all these people come in who might be affected by the virus? How do we prevent that from happening?
I don't believe that any of our buildings are used as polling stations. I believe it's the firehouse in Southbury and Shepherdson in Middlebury.
Not for the primary, but for the election in November.
The election in November would have, you would in the Southbury, you've also got the senior center and the library as well, but it's not the schools.
We're not using any schools then?
I'll double check on that and confirm it.
Well, then why don't we keep school open on election day then? It's another day we could get in before if we have to close down.
I think we can explore that going forward. The only calendar changes tonight were the half days in the beginning. I think that the election day is written as a professional development day in the teacher's contract. So I think that's something that we could approach the bargaining units with and have a conversation going forward. I just don't think that we could make that significant of a change at a board meeting without consulting any of the groups impacted by it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any other?
Just, I mean, and if you have to move it from, you know, to be another day off somewhere else, I mean, I guess it might just depend as you get closer to the date, because, you know, if, you know, yeah, just, it would depend, I guess, if you got closer, you can reevaluate.
All right. Any other questions or comments on the? All right. So I think we should do this one by roll call, because it's a little harder to. I think we should have a solid idea of where everyone is. So I'm going to call out board members' names. You can just say aye or nay or abstain. So Steve Suriani.
Aye.
John Cookson.
Aye.
Aye. Heather Rogers.
Aye.
Aye. Heather Dwyer.
Aye.
Aye. Sharon Attic.
Aye.
Did you hear me? This is Sharon Attic. Aye.
Aye. Sharon Attic is an aye. Peter Vaccarelli.
Aye.
Aye. Richard Spirito.
Aye.
Aye. Myself, Mary Manzo, I am an aye, and Shannon is absent right now. So the motion passes. Thank you. Next is the announcement of future meetings. It's not a meeting of the Board of Education on Wednesday, August 12th, the public question and answer session at 2 to 3 o'clock, but I'm still going to make a plug for it and just let people know that that is another opportunity. On Wednesday, August 12th from 2 to 3, it's a public question and answer session on our district channel where you can ask questions to our superintendent. I know it was kind of hard during public comment tonight not to answer questions. I saw you like wanting to answer questions. It's a tough rule that we have for public meetings, but that's your opportunity. If you felt that you didn't get your question answered tonight, we definitely welcome you to do the public question and answer session. And I know some people are still out of power, and so they're concerned that they can't attend that event online, but that session will be recorded and put on our website, and you could definitely ask friends to ask your questions, and you could still submit questions through our website as well. So we know that this is a very difficult time for all of us, and we definitely want you to feel that your questions are answered. The next Board of Education meetings, Wednesday, August 19th, 2020, Finance and Facilities Committee is at 6:30. Monday, September 14th, the Policy and Curriculum Committee meeting is at 6:30. Will there be another one before that, Steve, or is that?
My question would, yes, if you have a full board meeting, for sure, yes,
Okay.
we would have one.
All right, so that might be subject to change.
Yeah.
Okay. And then also Monday, September 14th, we have a regular meeting of the Board of Education at 7:30. May I have a motion to adjourn? John Cookson does the motion. Is there a second?
Can I throw in discussion just really quick?
Sure.
Yeah, just for questions and answers, the ones that were asked tonight, is it safe to say that that they'll be on the document, that you will answer them, and it'll be online as well, so people don't have to come to the town hall on Wednesday to hear the answers to the questions they've asked?
We've been capturing the questions put on the YouTube chat as well as anything in the webinar chat, and we'll answer those as part of the question and answer online. We will, any questions that people put in public comment, that'll be added to that Q&A document. And then I recognize that Wednesday is only an hour, and there may be more questions than that. So if you have questions that you want answered, you can certainly submit them ahead of time. We do recognize that there's really no good time to do this. We moved it from last week because of the storm. This week has several other meetings happening at night, and so it was difficult to find a night to do it, which is how Wednesday, it was just space that we could squeeze in for questions. We didn't want to put it out another week. So we'll answer as many questions as we can to parents. So, and also submit them ahead of time, and we'll answer them and put them on the website. Thank you for the question. That's good.
Right. Any other discussion on the motion to adjourn? All right. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Any opposed? Wants to keep on going, Steve? No? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Yeah.